project for a while now. It's been about nearly the last 4 years, and I've been working full-time and studying part-time, so I didn't really have much time as much as I wanted to put into the car. Now I've moved jobs and I'm a lot happier now, and I can put as much time as I want. All the parts were in boxes and they were labeled. I had to pick up the doors and the panels at a workshop in town where I lived in Cairns. I had a mate with a ute help me get the engine and the gearbox home safely. This project is about 80% complete. The car means so much to me as I grew up surrounding myself with cars. My parents used to buy me magazines when I was a little kid so I could read. I could learn about those old style classic cars. This changed into playing video games that were driving simulators like Burnout, Gran Turismo, Forza. So my passion for cars has never left me since I was young. When I wanted to start getting into driving cars, I fell in love with old classic cars again, and that old love that I rediscovered. Bit of a backstory, but when I went to high school and I got my first job at age 13 doing the bin run and cleaning and school maintenance until I turned 20, the maintenance manager was my boss and he took me in as his 2IC, or his second pair of eyes. That boss was a previous mechanic and rally car enthusiast, so I learned and I listened so much from his knowledge of the history of the Ford Escort, and now it is one of my favorite rally legends. In 2016, I was dropping off a best mate, to an airport one morning. And I remember it was about 5 or 6 a.m. and I saw a brown 4-door Escort driving past me on the way to the airport. So after I dropped my friend off, went back home and looked for an Escort in the local area. And to my luck, I found a 4-door rolling shell with all the parts boxed up and secured. The shell had been roughly sanded and surfaced with an etch primer, 426 type, and a 2-pack paint. I only had a couple coats, so I had to really redo the paint. When contacting the seller, we organised to see it and get pictures. And you can see it as it's sitting there just as a rolling shell. And I had my mate Daniel in the picture as well with me. And he's a very good mechanic and generally mechanically minded guy. And he helped me a lot with look over for the common rust spots and to check the engine quality. To our dismay, we found no rust spots apart from little imperfections in the body itself that had fixed with bog and building up a really good base coat primer. Now, the car was in that edge primer for about 2 years before, and I tried to sand it back, but it'd gotten so hard because it was a 2-pack that I really couldn't even get it to bare metal after sanding it for like 3 minutes with an 80 grit wet and dry. So there's no point trying to sand back that whole body again just to repaint it. So I kept that primer as a good surface primer to build off. So I told you I bought it off of the seller. Well, funny story was she actually, her name was Bonnie, and she had bought this car. Creepy, right? Bought this car from my boss that used to teach me about Ford Escorts and rallies and everything. So I literally bought the car that my boss had built 15-20 years ago without even knowing it. I already bought it, and I went after I left the job at age 20. I had obviously that other job I wasn't really happy with, but I was there and I was making money, so it was alright. It was a job. Now, I bought this Ford Escort and I've been having it. I've been working on it for about a month now, and I told my boss that I bought a project car and I was, working on it and everything. I didn't tell him what type I bought, but he'd assumed that I bought a Ford Escort. Just, my passion for it and always talking about it at Smoko, always wanting to, showing videos of the new rallies and everything. So I went back to my old boss and I started talking to him, telling him what the specs were for the car. And, I started listing off, it was a four-door, 1979 Escort. It had a Pinto 2-liter motor in it. It had, a lot of modifications. And he said to me, real, you know, just curious, he said, "Who'd you buy it off of?" And I said to him, I bought it off of a lady called Bonnie. And he said, was it last name blah, blah, blah? And I said, yeah, it was. He's like, well, that's who I sold my old Ford Escort to back in the day. And I was like, oh my God, that's creepy. Like, that's crazy. So back in 2016, I had organized a mate. Well, I was trying to get a mate to paint it for me because he was a painter. And so I went to him and asked him how much he was going to charge. I said, oh, don't worry about it, man. I said, don't worry about it, man. I'll do it myself. I'll just give it a go. So I bought some paint. I got the right color code for Ford blue, and it was the bold blue color code. I bought it for $550, the paint itself. So it was 2 liters of actual paint, and you had the liter of hardener, liter of thinners. So you had the 2 liters of paint, you had a liter of hardener, you had a liter of thinners, and that was it. $550. And that got me to about painting the whole car 3-4 coats solid. Now, because this was a 2-pack, and I had a 2-pack primer, they just go hand in hand pretty well. I didn't want to do a metallic or speckles through my paint and have to do another clear coat on top. It's just another hassle on top of the paint. So I decided to just go 2-pack, and over time, I don't know if you know this, but 2-pack gets stronger. The paint gets harder over time. So I think that primer serves, so as I said, it was just impossible to sand off. But, this takes like a year or two just being out, absorbing sunlight. So it took me about nearly a year and a half to prep this car while working full-time and studying. So I painted it in January 2018, and I wanted to see if there are any spots, after I painted it that come up maybe like a couple months later in the summer or in the winter. Anything that just might be wrong or imperfect. I just wanted to see if there was anything that would just pop up and I'd be like, oh, okay, cool. I've got to deal with that before I can get it painted perfectly.